Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2.
Forgive me, we're just having a quick technical challenge. We'll begin in about 30 seconds. Good morning, everybody. First of all, we're here on the Anishinaabe unceded territory of the Algonquin people. The people of the Anishinaabe Nation have lived here on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have been nurtured and continue to be nurtured on this land. We do have regrets from Councillor Devine today, but at this time, I'll look to our amazing coordinator, Rosa, to do the roll call, please.
Councillor Bradley,
Here.
Councillor Delrouze,
Here.
Conseiller Desroches.
Here.
Councillor Devine, Councillor Dudas.
Ici.
Councillor Gower,
Here.
Councillor Johnson,
Here.
Councillor Lowe,
Here.
Councillor Lula,
Good morning.
Councillor Troster.
Here.
Vice Chair Kitts. Here. Chair Tierney.
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. First of all, we'll just go through agenda clearing. At this point, we have no declarations of interest at date. Confirmation of the minutes 14 September 26, 2024. Are those carried? Thank you. We do have responses to inquiries listed below. 4.1 accessible parking permit. And we do have a response to inquiry about well, I guess that's the only one on that one. So we'll go on to item 5. We do have a presentation today. Yes, a presentation. And I believe we also have, well, we have no delegations and no correspondence, but it's a really exciting presentation on road cuts. Yeah, that's what we do here. So we'll hold that item. And we'll look at item number 6. Item number 6, minor amendments to the traffic and parking bylaw to enhance accessible parking opportunities.
I have a couple questions if that's okay.
So we'll hold that item as well. Thank you very much. And we actually do have correspondence and a speaker on that one as well. So that's perfect. We have no in-camera items. We do have IPD 8.1 Tremblay Station multi-use pathway crossing via station. Federal district, no issues on that. Great. I will have a motion coming forward. It's still being worked on by our amazing staff. I know I always say, please don't do 11th hour motions, but unfortunately this is where we're at. And I'll go back to the presentation at this point. So we'll begin. Oh, Councillor Lula?
Yes, Chair. I don't know if it made it onto the the agenda. However, I do also have a motion.
Oh, sorry about that, Councillor Lula. Yes, we do have notice and motion. Let's make sure it's on here. Yes, community safety zone on Prestwick Drive. So it's just a notice of motion. We'll get you to read that in later on. But thank you very much, Councillor, for highlighting my error. I appreciate that. So I'm just kidding with you. So let's go back to our wonderful road cut permit discussion today. It's always exciting stuff. So we got Rob, and of course we got Rob, and we got Court. We got the whole gang here today. So I'll turn the floor over to you guys, and let's see that wonderful slideshow. It's 50 slides, right? It's like OC. We just do lots of slides. I'm just joking, Glenn. Okay, I'm here all night, everybody. Try the fish.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you very much for having us today. Mr. McLaughlin will be giving the presentation, Program Manager of Right Away. Joining me as well today is Kevin Lamer, who's our Program Manager of Inspections in our field. It's about a 10-minute presentation. Rob.
Thank you, Court. Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. I'll say let the excitement begin. In terms of the title of this presentation, as it denotes, this is about the fees associated with the various permits and applications for work within the right-of-way as well as related matters. I'm not sure who's controlling the deck. Oh, there we go. So just to provide some context around what the right-of-way is, we have over 12,000 lane kilometers of right-of-way within the city. And when we're talking about the right-of-way, we're not just talking about the roadway itself, but all of the elements within the lateral property lines thereof, including the boulevards, the sidewalks, etc. And underneath those, you'll see, generally speaking, the shallow utilities such as electrical, gas, and telecom within the boulevards and sidewalks, and then our own city infrastructure underneath the road itself in terms of water, sewer, and storm. And the graphic up on the top right there helps to illustrate generally the breadth of the right-of-way that we see with all of the different underground components underneath. And as a result of all of that, there's a variety of actors that are prevalent within the right-of-way doing work. We've got developers and contractors doing service connections, installing shoring for different development projects that are done right up to the lot line, as well as utilities working on their plant, installing new plant, doing repairs, and of course the city itself in terms of doing its own rehabilitation work and repairs. As a result of all these actors working within the right-of-way, we need to make sure that the work must be coordinated. We need to make sure it's tracked, and we also need to make sure that we're mitigating all of the impacts in terms of the impacts on our assets, as well as the impacts to mobility as people are moving around the city. When it comes to the installation of infrastructure within the right-of-way, there's two separate but related processes that the right-of-way branch undertakes. The first is municipal consent approval, and that's where we have third parties that are applying to put their plant within the city's right-of-way. This is generally our utility partners, but it could also include developers, again, looking to undertake shoring within the right-of-way. And then when it comes to city projects and city infrastructure, we also undertake utility circulations to effectively ensure that these are coordinated. And the objectives of both of these processes are very similar, and it's to ensure that conflicts are mitigated in terms of the proposed infrastructure relative to what's existing within the right-of-way. We want to make sure that city assets are protected. So for example, if something is looking to be installed close to a water main, we want to make sure we're capturing conditions for the protection of that water main. We want to make sure that work is coordinated so that we're limiting the amount of times that the road is open for surgery and having people go in at the same time if the opportunity presents itself. And similarly, if there is an opportunity to stage work such that we have a utility going in and doing work before we're going in to repave a road, that's something we want to make sure happens and not the reverse. And all of this, of course, helps to ensure the timely facilitation of development approvals. Over the last year, we've been undertaking a review of our municipal consent and utility circulation program. We've been looking to modernize our procedures and make sure that we're up to date and properly integrated with all of our other city groups, as well as looking at how we can better facilitate cooperation with our utility partners in terms of the Enbridges, hydros, and telecoms alike. And as part of that, you get the. There we go. As part of that, we've identified the need to ensure that fees are put in place for effective cost recovery. This, of course, aligns with the corporate service reviews that are going on right now, as well as our user fees and charges policy. When we looked at the methodology to employ, we're using a methodology in calculating these fees that's been used by other municipalities, such as Vancouver and Edmonton, and also one that has been endorsed by the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, which is the body responsible for the regulatory oversight of telecoms. So with that, if we were to face a challenge with respect to the fees before you today, we know that we're in good stead in terms of past precedent before that commission. In terms of the fees that are before you in the report that we're proposing, you'll see these on the right-hand side. For municipal consent, we're looking at an application fee of $278, a circulation fee of $359, and a per meter rate of $41. And to explain that a little bit, not all projects that come in for a municipal consent application necessarily require a circulation. It's only those that are larger in scope that would require circulation, and those would be the ones that are proposed to be subject to the per meter rate, so that fees are properly apportioned between small projects and large projects. For utility circulations, we're proposing a circulation fee of $675, and again, a per meter rate of 15 cents. There's no distinguishing here between an application and a circulation fee. That's built into the circulation fee, because when we're circulating work by the city, it is always a circulation. In terms of some of the other recommendations under the report related to municipal consent and utility circulations, we're also requesting the conversion of a temporary FTE to a permanent FTE to ensure that we're able to continue to deliver our services on time, and also able to review all of the different development applications that we are also involved in to assess the right-of-way impacts without any jeopardization to development review timelines as well. This FTE will be fully funded by the fees that are proposed within the report. We're also recommending some changes to delegated authority as part of this. The first is the passage of a bylaw for municipal consents and utility circulation to provide the GM of PDBS with the authority to administer the process generally and make any necessary modifications to application requirements to be able to rescind or modify conditions of municipal consents, et cetera. The other is with respect to the existing delegated authority around the execution of municipal access agreements. And to pause there briefly to speak generally to what those are, municipal access agreements are the agreements that we have with the various telecommunication carriers with respect to their rights of access to our city as a whole. So we have an agreement with Rogers, with Bell, with TELUS around effectively the rules of engagement when they want to come into our roadway and install their plant. Right now, the delegated authority is such that where a municipal access agreement will have an annual cost of less than $10,000, which is representative of the permitting fees for municipal consent. Currently, we have that delegated authority, but in larger instances, we do not. What we're proposing is through the recommendation that with fees in place, we will be getting rid of that annual payment. It's outdated. It's not necessarily reflective year over year of the amount and cost associated with each telecom. And then having full delegated authority to execute those municipal access agreements. This will be more efficient, and similarly, it accords with our other delegated authority with respect to infrastructure agreements within the right-of-way. Turning to road cut permits, anybody looking to excavate within the right-of-way is required to take out a road cut permit. These are governed by the road activity bylaw, and the objectives in part are to ensure that there's proper coordination of all the works that are going on, as well as tracking of all the works. We receive questions around claims and needing to go back and look at past history. We need to, and we receive SRs in relation to what work is going on where, as we've heard from all of you in the past. And we need to be able, through the road cut permits, to ensure that all this work is tracked so that we can respond accordingly. From a coordination perspective as well, we certainly don't want a utility showing up at the same time as a developer is looking to do service connections and having two people working within the same space at the same time. And as I mentioned with respect to the municipal consents as well, it's another opportunity to coordinate the works relative to the work we're doing to ensure there's the proper order of operations in place. This committee may recall between 2019 and 2021, we undertook a major overhaul of the road activity bylaw to update it. There was a significant regulatory overhaul to update the regulations to accord with best practices. We undertook to improve our capacity, and through the institution of more FTEs, we were able to improve our service delivery timeframes such that prior to 2021, where we were taking 30 to 40 business days to issue a road cut permit and projects were being delayed, including our own city projects, we were able to bring that back down with the right capacity to our standard 10 working day timeframe. In addition to that, we now have a fast-tracked lane of 1 to 2 days with respect to capital projects to ensure those are moving through the queue more quickly. We also introduced the right-of-way inspections team to have greater oversight over road cuts. And this team has proven very effective, dealing with upwards of 3,000 service requests each year in relation to work going on within the right-of-way. All of this improvement was funded through the introduction of a new street segment fee in terms of cost recovery back in 2021. And this was informed by a fee review at that time that looked at permit volumes between 2017 and 2020. Since that time, we've recognized a need to make some adjustments to the street segment fee to better align those costs relative to the level of effort reflective of administering, reviewing, and inspecting a road cut permit for work by the city or by a third party. And as a result of that, we're proposing a differentiation of the fees, which I'll speak to in a moment. And I'll also say that these fees are being informed by new inspection resources that have been brought on since 2021, as well as new permit volume metrics between 2022 and June of 2024. So with that, on the bottom, in terms of the table on the slide, you'll see on the left-hand side, the street segment fee that would be carried forward into 2025, if nothing was done today, at $308. Whereas what we're proposing, again, to better proportion or apportion the cost recovery between the different permit applications that we see between external and internal groups to ensure proper cost recovery between the two. We've got an external street segment fee proposed of $464, an internal street segment fee of $224, then specifically with respect to capital projects, an internal street segment fee of $51. We're also recommending a modification to the temporary road closure fee, which if nothing were carried forward, then in 2025, that would be just under $1,200. But in order to update this to reflect full cost recovery relative to permit volumes between 2022 and June of 2024, we're proposing an increase in that fee to $1,748. All of this, if approved, will help. All of this, if approved, will help to ensure that we have continued cost recovery, that we're able to deliver on our program in terms of the service turnaround timeframes, the proper inspection oversight. And of course, this aligns with the overarching corporate service reviews that are going on right now. In terms of consultation and the next steps, we have had engagement with all of our public utilities through the Utility Coordination Committee. So this is where we meet monthly with our telecom partners, all of the two hydros, Enbridge, as well as others, to present these. We didn't receive any concerns at this point. We'd also talked with GOBA and had not heard anything of concern there as well. And then more recently, we had presented to the National Capital Heavy Construction Association. So this is your Tomlinsons and your Kavanaughs. And to date, we haven't received any concerns in terms of feedback on the proposed fees, explaining to them that this is what was necessary in order to ensure we continue to be cost recoverable in our efforts. Internally, we've also been working and coordinating with other departments, given that road cut permits and temporary road closures do apply internally as well. And if approved, all of this would be implemented on January 1st, 2025, but for telecoms with existing municipal access agreements, because we're tied to those agreements until such time as we renegotiate. So that annual fee that I mentioned before would carry on until such time as we renegotiate those agreements and can then move to the application by application approach that's proposed. Just before we conclude the presentation, moving away what's in the report before you, we wanted to take the opportunity to highlight some of the other right-of-way oversight tools that we have before us and that we employ, because it's not just about infrastructure and excavation activities. We also, in partnership with traffic services, undertake the issuance of temporary construction encroachment permits to facilitate development very close to the lot line and to facilitate their use of the right-of-way in order to hoard. I know at the previous meeting with the presentation on Block 2 that was discussed in depth, so I won't go too far into that. but did want to talk about overdimensional vehicle permits. It's something that doesn't often get brought up in the public realm, but is something that is very much a part of our life in terms of the permits, and I'm sure you've all seen them around. Under the Highway Traffic Act, which stipulates the maximum length, width, height, and weight of a vehicle that can travel on a highway, where those are exceeded, we are given the authority as a municipality to permit that on a case-by-case basis. And we do so under our overdimensional vehicle bylaw. So where you've got something that may be too long, where you've got something that may be too wide, too high, or maybe too heavy, we will evaluate that, and we have different permit classes under which we may issue a permit to allow that vehicle to proceed. The purpose of this is to ensure that we're coordinating with respect to the appropriate route that they're taking in terms of not running into an ongoing construction project. We don't want a heavy vehicle running headfirst into, say, a road closure or to something where they can't get by due to a temporary construction encroachment. We also don't want them driving down a freshly paved road where they may damage the asphalt due to the weight. And similarly, we don't want them driving over bridges that can't take the weight of the vehicle. So that goes back to protecting our infrastructure, as you see as the second point there. We also coordinate with police to ensure that there's proper escorts in order to stop traffic if we need to close down that bridge temporarily in order to allow the truck to proceed uninhibited by oncoming traffic. We also work with traffic services again to ensure that if there's any traffic signs that need to be removed or traffic signals that need to be removed in order to coordinate turns, we're doing that as well. And this is all done in conjunction with respect for the city's heavy truck routes. But in this case in particular, it's not just about sticking to the truck routes, it's about approving the particular permit route that is going on as part of that heavy or overdimensional vehicle movement in order to make sure that we have an evaluation of all the particular touch points as that heavy vehicle is traveling along. And with that, that concludes the presentation.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Exciting stuff. I actually really do enjoy it. I'm looking at the board here. I just want to make sure, Rosa, is it going left to right here on this one? It is. So Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. My questions relate to the new additional resources over the last year to look at enforcement of road cut work. Can you let us know how many contractors had been instructed to redo the work after inspections were completed?
Thank you for the question, Chair. We don't have those specific numbers for you for the amount of enforcement, with the exception that what we did introduce in 2019 was a mandatory inspection before we allow a permit to go into a road cut warranty. So part of that process where I think we failed in past was a lot of the work was being partially done or not completely done. In 2019, we implemented a standard process we call a road cut completion report, if you will, which is to confirm that all the work is done and have a mandatory review done by our city inspection staff with the contractor to determine that the reinstatement is acceptable to the city. And in fact, that is when the warranty starts. And we currently have a 2-year warranty.
And so once that warranty is in place, is enforcement, you essentially have the ability to go back to the contractor within that 2 years. Do you have any sense of, you know, what kind of demands those enforcement activities have had on them since that regime has been put in place? Has it been taken up by the public and councillors to work within the warranty?
Thanks for the question, Chair. I would say I don't have those specific details, Councillor, but in generally sense, yes. I think what's been happening is having the mandatory inspection happen before it goes into warranty, working with our colleagues throughout the city and our operational department at traffic, also reporting to us any deficiencies identified with all the eyes we have on the road. We have that avenue now to at least go back and actually have those repairs done. And then, of course, through our own team, we're also doing that 2-year warranty at the end of that warranty frame to make sure that it's still compliant before we release the warranty time frame. So I don't have the specific numbers, but I mean, that's something that we could take away.
Okay, that would be nice. So I understand then that even at the end of the warranty, whether or not complaints have been made, you go back and check and then release the warranty for every road cut?
Yes, that's correct.
Wow.
So
Okay,
so
I
it's for
didn't
every
understand the extent of the oversight that has been put in place. So thank you for those details. I'll come back on the board if I have further questions. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you very much. Vice Chair Kitts.
Thanks, Chair. When it comes to the temporary road closures, I note that there's a fixed fee no matter no matter the duration of the closure. So administratively, is it the same from a cost recovery basis if it's a 5-day closure versus a 5-month closure?
Chair, generally speaking, yes. When we came up with the fee, what we were looking at was the total cost of operating the necessary groups that are feeding into that review as part of the road closures, and then averaging that cost out relative to the past permit volumes. It didn't take into account necessarily whether the individual closures were 1 day, 2 weeks, or 10 days. But what I will say is that we do have it on our work plan to review the fees associated with occupancy for temporary construction encroachments. And as part of that, we can look at what best practices are across Canada and across Ontario with respect to what municipalities are doing in terms of fees for temporary road closures. Assuming that the councillor's question is speaking to how we can encourage applicants to be as expeditious as possible with respect to their road closures.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that. Councillor Dudas, if it's okay, I'll just go to Councillor DeRose. We had some technical issues there. Thank you very much. Councillor DeRose. And please keep your cameras on if you're even in the room. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for the education on getting on the list there. Thank you. For me, this is more than just a cost recovery exercise. For me, I think once you pay for the service, there's an expectation on a high level of service and frankly a service standard. And I don't see a service standard in here, but I'm wondering if you could talk about the relationship between you're paying and there should be a high level of service that comes from all parties to get to the permissions that we're seeking.
Yeah, Chair, maybe I'll break that answer up into 2 elements, one being for the municipal consents and the other with respect to the road cuts. When it comes to the municipal consents, as I noted in the presentation, a lot of what we're doing is a coordination effort. And when we looked as part of that review that I spoke of over the past year in terms of how we can improve our processes, what we looked at is making sure that we've got a development standard related to responding to and providing those municipal consents within a window that is appropriate. And it's bears mentioning that the municipal consent process is a bit more involved than just the staff time, and there are 3 separate components. The first is the intake of the application and its review, and where there is not a circulation warranted or necessary, then staff have committed to a 2-week turnaround time to have that municipal consent back to the utilities. When there is a circulation, it falls a bit out of our control insofar as we're working in partnership with all of the different utilities and those who have infrastructure within the road to circulate to them to see whether or not they have any concerns with what's proposed relative to the proximity of their own infrastructure. We're also looking for opportunities through that, whether they have any planned work so that we can coordinate efforts. With that, we've been talking with our utility partners, and this speaks to the cooperation that I mentioned during the presentation, at having a 15 business day turnaround time for everybody to come back with their different comments on the circulation. Once that closes, then we've committed to a 1-week turnaround time to take all those comments, assess the conditions that are necessary, and then provide the municipal consent to the party. When it comes to road cut permits, that is something that's wholly within our control. And as I mentioned before, prior to 2021, without the resources in place, we were having a significant challenge in having an acceptable service standard to the industry. And we heard very much about that at the time. And as part of that review that came forward between 2019 and 2021, we were able to, through the cost recovery mechanism that was proposed in that report, get additional resources such that now we're meeting the consistent service standard of 10 working days for those permits. And we've been able to stick to that since, regardless of increases in volumes that have come forward.
Thank you. I'm particularly interested in the telecommunication applications that come in. And I hear from residents that they're in favor of obviously the upgrades, but when they see the call before you dig flags installed, weeks and weeks and weeks go by where they can't cut the grass, where we have our own city right of ways on the boulevards are uncut because the flags are there. It's completely unacceptable that it takes that much time. And then I am caught in a position that I'm refereeing who is at fault here in terms of why work isn't getting done. In my mind, the utility companies, if they've called and got those flags, then they need to get the work done in a timely fashion. And really, if they haven't, those are flags of failure of the process. So can you speak to, again, the expectations that when those flags go in, that work will be undertaken in a timely manner? And if it's not, what recourse do the residents have so they can cut their lawn and take care of their properties and not wait weeks?
Certainly, Chair. And again, I'm going to, with your indulgence, I'm going to split this into two parts. One is to speak to what our process is with respect to the overall approval of these works for them to proceed as between the municipal consent and the road cuts, and then talk a little bit about the one call process that you mentioned with respect to the locate flags. So to use the example of a telecom, when they come in, they go through the municipal consent process and that is issued. They have 1 year from that period to go and pull a road cut permit. So they're planning ahead, because what the municipal consent is about looking at where in the road the location of that plant is going to go. So they're going through the planning stages. With that approval, they're going to go and contract that work. And again, our approval is good for a year within which they need to go and pull that road cut permit, which signals they should be ready to go and construct. And under the road activity bylaw, you have 60 days. This is anybody, not just a telecommunication carrier. You have 60 days to go and commence that work. So you need to effectively go and put a shovel in the ground so that you have indicated that you're going to start. Once you start work, the bylaw requires that you proceed expeditiously until you're done. There's not necessarily a time frame, because depending on the scope of the work involved, the complexities, et cetera, we can't necessarily say in every instance you have to be done in 2 weeks. But what we do say is that you have to keep working. There are reasonableness measures in place in terms of weather, et cetera. But generally speaking, once you start, you need to keep going until you are done. Before they pull that road cut permit, they should be calling for locates, as you note. And there were significant changes to the one call legislation over the past 2 years. One of which is that now you cannot call for locates in a period greater than 30 days before you intend to construct. So the idea of calling 6 months before you're going to go out, getting those flags up, getting the paint on the ground is no longer acceptable. And I would say to all councillors on the committee, if you are receiving concerns from residents around locate flags, we have connections with one call. That is a provincially regulated matter. It's not within necessarily the purview of the city, but we can work with one call in order for them to undertake the necessary enforcement to see what's going on with respect to those locates and why the work isn't being actioned.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I'll relay that to residents this upcoming construction season. Last question, Chair, at this point is on the road cuts and the permits. And the city is going through hyper growth, and more people are seeing road cuts right across the city. Some small, some large. And I have made it clear in my mind, and I've told to residents that these should only be carried out, road closures, when it's absolutely necessary. Because it really does test the patience of the community and it is disruptive. So can you comment on what this fee will do to ensure that when people apply for those road closures, that they're truly necessary and that work will be done as quickly as possible so that the community can get back to normal? Again, given the long list of projects that are happening right across the city. Thanks.
Chair, I'm going to provide an initial answer with respect to the fee, and then maybe if I could turn it over to my colleague in traffic services to speak to some of the review that goes on from a traffic perspective and the management of the necessity of those closures. But I think it's worth noting too that this temporary road closure fee was introduced through the review that was done and concluded in 2021. And prior to that, there was no fee. So applicants could apply without any cost associated. And the result was, and as I'm sure you can all imagine, it's easy to close the road to do the work. It's cheaper than trying to manage the traffic around that. So when instituting a fee to ensure that we're cost recovering, then that in and of itself already provides a disincentive to pursue that avenue as an option. When you look at the fee that we're proposing today, moving from around $1,200 to $1,700 in terms of the proposed cost recovery, that fee calculation is based on permit volumes between 2022 and June of 2024, as I noted. And I like to think and infer from that, that because that fee is going up it's representative of the fact that we have fewer road closure applications that have been submitted between 2022 and June of 2024. So that is to say that I believe that there is some disincentive and the process is working to dissuade people from just using the easier route and applying for the road closure. And we're seeing them pay that fee only when it is necessary. The other thing too that we've instituted as part of this that I didn't speak to in the presentation is if you have a road closure that you stipulate you need the road closed for 2 weeks in order to effect that work, if at the 2-week mark you're coming back and saying, I need to close that road for a further week, for 2 days, we are making them pay the fee again, because that's further work that we need to do on our end in order to ensure that all the proper parties are notified, and that we've assessed whether or not that is warranted. With that, if I could turn it over to Traffic Services, maybe to speak a little bit about the review that goes on as part of each road closure application.
Thank you, Chair. Traffic Services is responsible for reviewing and providing comments and conditions for road cut and road closure permits. Road closure is typically last resort. So when we receive a request, traffic management staff will reach out to the contractors to really try to get an understanding of the nature of the work that's being done. Typically, if the infrastructure is deep in the middle of the road, requires large equipment to complete the work, safely maintaining traffic isn't always possible without a road closure. So we do encourage review of other options by the contractor before conditions are provided.
Good. Thank you for the answers. I'll end it there, Chair. Thank you.
Great questions. Councillor Dudas.
Yes, thank you very much. We're talking about the fee structure, but this is also part of the overall comprehensive review. And I wanted to understand a little bit more about the comments about collaboration between contractors, coordination of the work, and how this might actually improve it. And I'm going to give you a little example because I would like to know how we can address this situation going forward. OC Transpo is in the process of building a roundabout as an extension of their Jeanne d'Arc LRT station. It is a situation that makes it very difficult because it's right in front of elementary school. The contractors and the project manager have been working closely with the community and myself, trying to mitigate the situation. As you can anticipate, an open construction site would be adjacent to a school site and a very busy road. Without any forewarning to myself, not that I'd necessarily get a heads up, but even the project manager, Hydro Ottawa, started a construction project completely adjacent to this project. So much so that I was getting calls from parents saying this is part of the work for the roundabout, blocking the school access. I'm happy to take that part offline, but I'm bringing this up because we have had many conversations in the past about utilities and different projects where it's all about coordination. It's all about not having that large amount of impact. And I know how difficult it is when you're getting bombarded by multiple requests for road closure permits and, different types of permits for you guys to coordinate it. How will what we approve today and the overall comprehensive review, how will that make sure that these kind of things don't happen again?
Chair, maybe to bite off a few different pieces with the councillor's question there. Turning first to the coordination piece, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about the notifications and some of the emergency work that might occur. But prior to these improvements, I will say that staff always strive to coordinate. But one thing that we've done through this review is recognize where the gaps are. And a lot of those gaps related to the communication that we're seeing between utilities. So making sure that as part of facilitating those conversations, we're pushing them to come to the table and have those conversations with respect to their planned works to ensure that there's an opportunity for coordination. Additionally, as part of the review of our application forms in and of themselves, we're asking the question pointedly and not deeming an application complete until that is completed. As part of a circulation to all the different respondents when we receive it, do you have any planned work within the area? And if they say no to that, and they come back a few weeks later with an application for work, then we're going to question whether or not that work should proceed on the basis of it being planned works, because they didn't identify as part of this other work that they were coming in to do this here. Admittedly, I can't speak to the specifics of your case, and certainly welcome to talk offline about that. But generally speaking, that's where we're looking to push that coordination conversation. So Those of you may recall that we have restrictions on cuts into new pavement where we have freshly paved roads. That would be a perfect example where if somebody came in and then we later went in and paved that road. At the time when that person came in, you had Hydro Ottawa saying, not to use them as an example, but just because you brought it up, we have no planned work in the area, so no need for us to coordinate our project at this time. We go and pave the road. They come back. We would say, no, we're not going to waive any kind of restrictions on cuts into new pavement here because you had the opportunity and we have the circulation form to identify that you said you had no planned work that you need to come in here. So you can wait and we can space it out accordingly. Wait till it's not going to damage our fresh asphalt. And more particularly, when you may have a project ongoing, wait till the impacts of that are finished. So we're not, to your point, doubling down on the impact in the community. If I could take a moment too to talk about coordination aside, also the notification that needs to occur. And under the road activity bylaw, when a road cut permit is pulled, there's an obligation to notify both the community as well in some cases as the ward councillor before that work commences. And there's two different periods where the work will involve the closure of a road, the rerouting of buses, the closure of a sidewalk, or is planned to last longer than 7 days. Then a 10 working day notice needs to be provided both to those beside and near the work, as well as to the ward councillor. So with that, there's the opportunity to say, what's going on? Have you talked to the school? Have you talked to OC Transpo? And having those conversations before the impacts are presented in the field. Outside of those instances, effectively where there's a lesser impact of the work, I'll say, on mobility in particular, there's still a 2 working day notice period that's required to be given to those beside or near the work so that if people need to make arrangements because of the disruption, they have the opportunity to do so. Outside of those 2 instances, we do admittedly still have scenarios, and again, I'm not sure if in the instant case you mentioned, Councillor, this is it, where there are emergency works. So a water main breaks, there's a disruption to power, there's a major failure of a telecommunication infrastructure. And we have those in place where they can go in and do that emergency work within the right of way and then apply for the permit after the fact. But when those scenarios occur, we do question that to ensure whether or not it is properly to be classified as an emergency. And if we see that being taken advantage of, we have conversations and we have the tools within the road activity bylaw that we put in place in terms of enforcement with the last review to curb that kind of behavior.
I'm very pleased to hear that this has been considered as part of the package of overall changes that you're speaking to us about. I would have to say that this situation is very unlikely an emergency, not so much an emergency that they had to piggyback on this enormous amount of impactful construction on my community and the children. But I do appreciate that we will be able to address this going forward. And I am happy to talk about this one instance with you offline. But I do think that, you know, once again, it all comes down to coordination, because every time that a utility or a developer or a different group comes in and cuts up a piece of our city infrastructure, it has an impact. It could be a sidewalk, it could be a MUP, it could be our roads. It has an impact, and it's not just on motorists, it's on people and accessibility. So I think that that's essential, and I'm happy to see we're progressing towards a more effective process in that manner. So thank you very much.
Yeah, great questions, Councillor Gower.
Thanks, Chair. I was wondering if, when you were looking at cost recovery of staff time, if you considered at all the staff time in councillors' offices as part of that calculation?
Chair, we did not, no.
Next time these fees are reviewed, it might be something worth looking at. I remember a couple of years ago when we had both Bell and Rogers very active in our ward for about a 2-month period. I would say one of my casework staff was working half-time on replying to resident complaints. Often it was coordinating and with passing things on to the utilities themselves or to staff. But any of the significant road closures require a lot of coordination of stakeholder meetings and so on. And it does add up. And as our wards continue to grow, I think it's going to be, we are experiencing more and more pressure on our ability to respond effectively to residents. So on this and any other fee reviews, I'd really like to see some of the impact on our office staff time as well. Thanks, Chair.
Lots of nodding on that one for sure. Councillor Lowe.
Thanks, Chair. My camera's on in case you're case you're going to get at me for that. So this question sort of comes from a very specific example, but I'm sure it does happen across the city. Earlier in the summer, we had a road cut go in for an infrastructure connection for a previously unserviced lot. And what happened was something was not coordinated right or correctly, and drawings were mixed up, the pipe wasn't where it was supposed to be, blah, blah, blah. And then it turns out that the city then had to do its own work separate, and the road cut was sort of just left there in the middle of Woodruff in the north and southbound lanes. And it's deteriorated quickly. And then, you know, it was basically stuck in like a dispute between, I guess, the contractor and the city. I don't actually know where the dispute lies, but, you know, are there any other mechanisms being proposed in here that will sort of take care of situations like that? Because while I understand we need to resolve that dispute before saying who's responsible for reinstating the road cut, in the interim, it's incredibly literally painful and jarring for motorists and buses that go over that went over that road cut specifically. But I'm sure, again, this happens across the city too.
Thanks, Councillor, through the chair. Absolutely. I know exactly the one you're talking about. In situations where maybe I'll touch on a little bit before, just to kind of give you an idea of volumes. I'm sure everyone's aware of it. So since 2019, when we did the road activity bylaw, we introduced our inspection staff, particularly to the right-of-way inspection. And I just thought it'd be, you know, worth some benefit here, just to get an idea of some numbers. So we're up to 7 inspectors now on our team, with an average of about 3,400 road cuts at any one time that are started under warranty to that stage where we can release the warranty. And they're broken into work zones within the city. We try to do our best to establish them per ward. So on average, you're seeing between 2 and 3 wards per inspector, trying to keep on top of all of these events. With that, also add on, similar to Councillor Gower's question about service requests. So, you know, we average about 3,000 service requests per year, from everything from construction to traffic to locates, Councillor DeRoche's comments. So it is very consuming to try and do an investigation for all of these things. And in addition to that, when we have other groups within the city also doing their own contracts under city projects, we try not to overlay additional if I could say, additional enforcement on those. We often, if we get in a situation where we find out it's another group, you know, I'll say a water main break, for example, or a city sewer, or a sidewalk replacement that's being managed by the city, we'll often reach out to those project managers directly and ask for their support to help to get those issues resolved. So I would say we're very much frontline as far as making sure that they're following the conditions of the road cut permit. We work with our traffic colleagues to make sure that they're following the traffic conditions and trying to address any type of complaints that come in either through the councillor's office or directly from residents, to make sure that we're responding as fast as we can to determine what the issues are. Depending on the situation, if it's something where it's a third party, we're 100% front forward. We're the enforcement activity to say, you know, you need to come out, you need to do those repairs, you need to meet our we call it our R10 standard, to make sure that that road cut's reinstated properly and we're not causing those accessibility issues or traffic issues in relation to that road cut. And again, if it is an additional city group that's dealing with them, then of course we'll usually reach out with that project manager and use those tools within their contract to make sure that the items are addressed as quickly as possible. In a sense, I just wanted to kind of give you that general sense of how we coordinate in general when these type of things come through to our group. But I do know the specific one there, and I'm happy to take that offline if there's additional work that needs to be done.
No, not anymore. It was just like, I'm just sort of dealing with the fallout of it, I guess. It does continue. And but the good thing is the road cut is smooth and now, and I think they're going to resume work soon. So it's going to be cut back up. Anyway, when it comes to the inspection that you do before you release the warranty, what's that process? Like, do you just drive over it? Do you actually go and measure, put a level across the road or something? Or what's the process to determine that it has been adequately reinstated?
Thank you, Councillor the Chair. When we do the initial, I would say that that is our primary inspection, when we're actually contacted by the contractor to say, you know, Kevin, we're ready to go. Can you please come look at our site? That's very comprehensive as far as not just the road cut itself. Just for context, any excavation with a warranty, we're doing the same type of review. So it could be as detailed as a full road asphalt reinstatement. There are other elements, I will add, that depending on the context, there are certain things that might be happening as part of that review we did in 2019. I'll expand it a bit for infill development or anything within our greater resurfacing policy. We get into situations where we're also taking securities where you have like the 3-cut rule, if you will, that if there's 3 cuts that one particular road cut permit holder is instituting, we actually ask for a larger resurfacing. So it could very much be as part of that review that we're looking at the individual road cuts that are tied to that project. Then it will also be that review to say, oh, they're also going to be coming back and doing a larger resurfacing. So that staging wise out in the field, you might see different things happening at different times. And some of that I think is the feedback we get from residents is like, they just did this work, why are you back? It's actually now we're doing a larger resurfacing as part of what we required originally. When we get through any stages of complaints that happen throughout that 2-year warranty, we're responsive and going directly to that permit holder to say, you know, you need to come out again. We're getting additional complaints. There's deficiencies, there's settlement, and it can be settlement upwards too. It could be a bump or it could be a recess in the road, depending on the situation. They will be responsible for addressing those. When we do the actual warranty, we usually just do reporting, usually a month or 2 before that warranty stage is complete. So it gives us that opportunity to get out there and look at those cuts to make sure that there's no outstanding issues that need to be addressed before that warranty period comes up. Primarily what we're looking for is the product holding up to the standards that we put into place? Asphalt, concrete curb, concrete sidewalk. And I like to tease everyone that we're also the grass police. So we're looking into a lot of grass reinstatement as well. I trust that answers the question.
Yeah, I think I have some neighbors who are also grass police. Anyway, my last question, hey, there's my quote for today. My last question is it sort of relates to, it relates a little bit to that last answer there. And, you know, when we have road cut moratoriums because the road was recently resurfaced, I guess to manage expectations, when we talk to our residents, like the moratorium doesn't apply to road cuts related to development. Is that correct?
I'll say, and we try to move away from the term moratorium now because of the expectation that it creates with residents and with councillors to speak to the idea that the road will never be cut for the 3 years that it's under that time frame. So we call them restrictions on cuts into new pavement now. And to speak to the councillor's question, there are generally 2 instances where we may provide a waiver. The first is with respect to emergency work. Naturally, if we have to go in and do the work or a utility has to go in and do that work, we want to make sure that the service they're providing or we're providing is addressed. The other is generally with respect to development as well. To Councillor's question, it's hard to know in all the coordination that we're doing when someone is going to pull a building permit. That said, we are working very heavily with planning services and have been in the past that where we have pre-consultation meetings for larger developments, we're looking at what work is scheduled in the right of way in front of that over the next 3 to 5 year horizon to see where the 2 or I'll say 2 roads, pardon the pun, are going to converge in terms of when they're going to need to be in there to do work and when we're going to be doing that work. So looking at opportunities as part of the development process when they can do their servicing in advance of when we may be in resurfacing the road. But unfortunately, and in particularly in the context of infills where there isn't a site plan process that has oversight of that, it becomes a lot more challenging. And as Kevin spoke to, that's where we turn more to look at the reinstatement expectations. And that's where we turn to look at the broader resurfacing to get a better quality reinstatement over the road if we have to allow that particular building to proceed in order to have services.
I will finish off by saying, you know, I do appreciate the work you do. A great example of that, a positive example of that recently was a long-term care home on Strandherd, where I think just in the nick of time, we found out when the utilities were going to be run under the street, and the resurfacing on Strandherd, the final coat rather for Strandherd was sort of put off for that, so we didn't have road cuts on a brand new road. So thank you for that, and thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you for that. Still in first round here. I see Councillor Luloff. So you did have your camera on, Councillor DeRoche, but first round, Councillor Luloff, then Councillor DeRoche.
The chair is fair. Questions of staff here. What happens when a contractor takes out a road or lane closure permit and does not reopen the road by the agreed upon time?
Well, effectively, Chair, if they have taken the space, their permit expires, or the road closure is over, then they are effectively out there without permission, and there are enforcement actions that we can take. And this was something as part of the 2019 to 2021 review of the bylaw that we undertook, which was to improve not only the inspection oversight in terms of the eyes out on the road, but also the tools available. So we now have corrective work orders, stop work orders. We have our set fines associated with the different penalties, and we were able to secure the highest level fines that are allowable under a Part 1 to reflect the seriousness of when people are out doing what they're not supposed to, impacting our infrastructure and obstructing our traffic. We do, of course, have the conversation. So to the chair's question specifically, if a road was closed, that closure ended, and they still needed more time, we would assess, as was mentioned earlier, with respect to the necessity, whether or not there needs to be an extension, and they would pay for that in terms of an application. Otherwise, we're utilizing one of the enforcement tools that I mentioned to get them off the road.
So what happens if that contractor is doing work on behalf of a city project? What if it's our people?
For that one, if I could defer over to my colleague Taffy Nahas to speak to.
Councillor, sorry, Chair, the response on that is that in essence, the city road projects are subject to all of the permit requirements, and so they are also, excuse me, they're also subject to the enforcement provisions.
Okay. That's interesting. Sometimes road closures and ramp closures are undertaken under delegated authority. In particularly stage 2 LRT road closures. What are the minimum safety measures that are required to close an off-ramp when it's determined that such a closure is necessary under delegated authority? Like, is there a minimum distance where the closure needs to be announced? A minimum time that the closure needs to be announced? Do people need to be made aware of this closure? Should merge lanes be closed if they're closing an off-ramp?
Thank you, through you, Chair. The LRT project is responsible for the road closures associated with it, but typically if an off-ramp were to be closed, the deceleration lane should be closed as well. I don't have any specifics on the road closures related to the LRT project. I'm not sure if there is anybody who has some specifics on that.
Chair, just to recall on the project agreement with East-West Connectors or RTG or TNext, all have requirements that the contractor has to follow all bylaws, including applicable laws. So in essence, they are also subject to the same enforcement as well as process, application fees, etc.
That doesn't seem to be happening in practice. We charge a third party twice when they're unable to complete the work within the allotted time. But what happens when our contractors run into the same issue?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. In our capital projects, we have in our contracts, we have timelines that contractors need to follow. We talked earlier about communication. We talked earlier about planning. If a contractor is not out of the road and they did not let us know in advance that they needed more time to complete work, we have elements within the contract that allow us to do stop work orders, and depending on the contract, different elements that we can use to enforce. Also, as part of our vendor performance management, there are rates on how they follow the contract and deliver the project is being impacted.
Okay, let's make sure that we're not setting up a double standard here. Okay, Monday morning, Beacon Light working alongside Kev, miscommunication, left a lane closed on the 174, far beyond the 5:30 deadline, impacting rush hour traffic in the East End and creating absolute bedlam throughout my ward, Councillor Dudas's ward, Councillor Tierney's ward, affecting Councillor Kitz's residence, affecting Councillor DeRuse's residence. And, you know, all I got was it won't happen again. I'm sorry, basically. That evening, the off-ramp for Montreal Road was closed for what I'm told was 15 minutes without warning, no closure of the merge ramps, dead stop. So imagine, you know, going 80 kilometers an hour, pulling into the merge lane to get off at Montreal Road and almost running into the back of two semi-trucks because planning wasn't done properly. No warning whatsoever. And all I get is, oh, it happens. You know, we're allowed to close ramps on delegated authority and, you know, they needed the space or whatever. I think that we're setting up a double standard here. I don't believe for a minute that the contractors working on behalf of the city are being held to the same standard as third parties. So if we're voting for this, and this is the regime that we're going to go with, I want to make sure that we're not skirting our own responsibilities to our residents, that we're not playing funny with these rules to allow for contractors that are working on our projects to skirt the rules that we're putting in place here today. Because what we've seen, and I'm sure we'll get to this later with the chair, but what we've seen in the East End, especially over the course of the last little bit, when it comes to the very thing that we're talking about today in this report, has been utterly unacceptable and utterly disrespectful to the residents that are just trying to make their way around this beautiful city. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Luloff, and you're absolutely right. Our frustrations are there, and I will be moving out of the chair after the delegations on this item, and it will be Chair Kitts because I do have a motion that I'll be bringing forward that's just being circulated in a minute. Councillor DeRoche.
Thanks, Chair. In my view, this process or this regime that we're putting in place should mirror the building permit process. In that context, the building permit fees are set as such that it's not a moneymaker. And if we determine that the fees are too high, we will go back and lower them. We may run a reserve, which is prudent for a municipality, especially when we have low water years. But make no mistake, these fees will be baked into project costs, not just in the private sector, but in Karina's good projects that she has. So what will we do to monitor the fee and the revenue that's coming in to ensure it is truly just for cost recovery? Again, maybe some reserve, but we're keeping it as low as we can so that we can not put further stress on project costs. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Councillor. That's a great observation. In compliance with the user fee policy and the service fees that we undertake, and we are going to be reviewing these fees on an annual basis and looking at a 5-year average to make sure that we've got the extra scrutiny on it to ensure that we're only cost recovering. We're not making revenue off of these specific fees. So they will be adjusted on an annual basis. We don't have a reserve, so any surplus that does come through in this cost center goes into our general departmental revenues and into the overall corporate revenue cost center. But the intention here is it is only cost recovery, not revenue generation.
And you'll report back on that so that we can see that kind of scrutiny and that kind of oversight is going to be there just to make sure the fee is where it should be.
Yeah, certainly through the annual budget process, when we bring forward our fee schedule, we'll do so. And in our delegation of authority report, the department brings forward on an annual basis, we'll demonstrate that accountability as well.
Okay. I take you on your word to do that. I don't think I need a direction or what have you, but I think we'll have to watch it closely, make sure that we're on the button for the rate. Thank you. That's all, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Droz. Councillor Drews.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you, and I want to thank staff for the presentation, and I understand the need of the review and update of those, but I don't want to repeat what my council colleagues been talking about. And I do have an issue with the road closure because basically in rural area, I mean, we don't have multiple alternative route. You got to use those roads. And when you have roads, major road like Snake Island, we started the work, it was supposed to be done in 3 weeks, and it took 5 weeks. And yet when you have a resident and you're closing in the middle of agriculture season, which is a farmer around that road, and they need to use their equipment in and out because they're harvesting their crop. I mean, it is really not an ideal when you have 2 weeks extra. And when you ask the question why, well, because the contractor, we have to put the rail guard and all these excuses they give you. But then when people drive on that road, they don't see anyone is working. And I understand that sometimes the culvert need to be cures and there is some different work need to be dry and things like that. But when you have multiple contractor, one is doing the road and one is doing the rail guard, I mean, why there is not a coordination and what is the penalty for stuff like that? Like, I mean, will you review after the fact? We're supposed to be 3 weeks, end up in 5 weeks, and giving the community longer time where they should start doing alternate route. I mean, this is not unacceptable in my community. My community was very upset about it and we're not happy about it. But I'm not trying to pile up because good always with the communication, but I'm not understanding the timeline and why every time we need to ask a question and every time we need explanation, well, too bad. We can open the road for safeties, but don't they should coordinate all that ahead and making sure they have the right contractors and subcontracting to do all these roads? And what is the penalty for that?
Thank you for the questions and the comments. Councillor Drews, I heard about the issue on the project that you're mentioning. You are absolutely right that road closures in the rural area are very, very impactful because the detour is the next concession road. So it adds a lot of time to the commuters and a lot of disruptions. I have to apologize for that particular project that you're mentioning because I have to say that there was a gap and there was a lack of coordination. And I don't have a justification. It should have been done better. That was escalated to me, and we had a lot of discussions with my team, and we are putting further processes in place to review and make sure that when we have a road closure, it's the time that we are expecting. And if we need to extend that road closure, it's because of a very good reason and not because something that we could have avoided if we did a better job.
And I appreciate it, and thank you. I respect that there was always delay, but roads like Snake Islands, Bank Street, Stagecoach, those are core road, those are main road, and then they impact the commute every day for the resident. So I appreciate your addressing and looking into the gap because we are very helpful. We work with your team always when there is closure, when you need extended hour to finish the project and things. We're very sensitive for that to work with the contractor, but mistakes like that will put a bad taste in our community's mouth, and we don't like to really come back and always fight or argue with staff concerning some of the road closures. So we really appreciate it if you can address that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor. Just a quick couple of questions before I shift gears here. I want to thank you guys. Who knew road closures and cuts were so exciting? We know it in the East End for sure. So just to go back to, if the NCC, if the federal government, if anybody wants to close a road in this city, we have very strict guidelines on road closures. There's a process where we have to inform the public in a certain time frame. We put out digital boards. The city is very responsible and keeps things extraordinarily safe. Am I getting that right? The only exception to the entire road closures or anywhere in the city of Ottawa is the OC Transpo Rail Office that has the delegated authority through Richard Holder. Is that correct?
And I'll flip that over to legal services if you'll permit me, Chair.
Chair, the federal government as well as the provincial government, they're all subject to our bylaws and our.
Yep. So I'm just looking who the exception is, if everybody has to adhere to it. And we as councillors all have the ability to make sure that closures take place and people are informed in a correct way. We have a very strict process. Is there any exception to the rule like the one I just mentioned?
Again, Councillor, as I said earlier, east-west connectors as well as the other contractors have to be subject to our bylaws, and there's no, I'm not aware of any relief in the project agreement or the delegated authority, or as well as the reports that were carried in respect to the delegated authority to the director of RCP, but I could take that away and deal with your office directly.
Yeah, if you could actually get it back before council, because I'll have a motion, and I think that's going to really highlight it. The other thing is, if we notice as councillors, especially in the East End, where they're violating our own rules through a contractor that's hired by the city, what's the best channel to be able to deal with that, to ensure that they're being fined appropriately, to make sure that they understand the major traffic impacts that are taking place?
Certainly, Chair, if there's anything that you're seeing out there with respect to work that's occurring on the right of way, reaching out to our offices, we can then coordinate internally there to make sure that whomever is responsible and best positioned to handle the matter is coming to address it.
Okay, great. And final question is, when we do things from a city perspective, and I know this for a fact, so it's a bit of a loaded question, we always coordinate to make sure that we're not closing 10 blocks in a row. We work to ensure traffic flow continues. We look at special events that are taking place within communities. We look at budget consultations that are taking place. We have a scenario where a contractor with LRT Stage 2 in the east has decided to do full closures of certain roadways while we have a budget consultation in the east end of the city. We have LRT shut down on the 26th and 27th. If this was in the city's purview and not in LRT's purview, would there be better coordination of that?
Respectfully, Chair, I can't speak to the situation in particular that you're addressing, but in terms of our processes for temporary road closures, when we receive an application or when we're working with another city group for a road closure, we have a detailed list of circulants that we provide that information to in order to coordinate between emergency services, OC Transpo, garbage, et cetera, solid waste, I should say, sorry. So that all of those different services are made aware and can provide whatever conditions they need to. We're coordinating with special events, as you mentioned, in order to make sure that any other activities that are occurring within the right of way are taken into account when we're determining whether or not the closure is something that should proceed.
Great. And Stage 2 East, and you can follow up on this, is they don't have to adhere, they don't do the circulation, they don't look for the feedback. It's more of a timely fashion. That's why we allowed the delegated authority to take place the way it did when we started this construction, was to speed up the project. So they don't adhere to the same standards as every other project in the city.
In terms of Stage 2, I would defer to the answer that was provided by legal services with respect to what they're required to follow. And I can say with respect to our bylaws, they would follow the same process if they were applying for the road closures through our office in terms of the circulation that proceeds.
Chair, I like to add that for our capital projects, it's not just at the time of applying for the for the road closure permit. Our capital projects take a lot of plan ahead coordination before the contractor even allows for the road closure to happen. So it gives us an opportunity to know what is happening in the community, what is happening in schools, any budget meeting that you referred to, and give us an opportunity to work with the work counselor that sometimes identifies areas of the project that are important and will be impacted by that road closure. So it layers on top of the circulation that is done at the time of the permit, all the proactive way that we do on our capital projects for that coordination.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I want to thank you guys for your presentation today. I do appreciate that. And before we receive it, I do have a motion that's been circulated. At this point, I'll surrender the chair so you can blame Chair Kitts for the order of hands that go up. But at this point, I'm going to read the following motion based on some of the conversations taking place today. Whereas Stage 2 Light Rail East construction has direct impacts on the traffic in the East End, whereas City Council has delegated authority to the rail office to manage certain traffic and transportation matters, including road closures as part of Stage 2 Light Rail construction project to expedite the construction, whereas the standard road closures for construction through the Public Works have strict criteria to ensure the appropriate traffic information, digital signage, and communications are provided to the affected ward councillors in advance, whereas the project has gone far longer than anticipated and closures have taken place that are not scheduled well in advance, whereas there are limited alternative routes in the area and closures are not fully accounting for the current back to work volumes, which we're now seeing, whereas intersections are continually blocked and creating hours of additional traffic and pollution to the environment, as well as safety concerns. Whereas there's no police directing traffic, which may be required if this was a standard road construction process. Therefore, be it resolved that staff in Public Works, in consultation with the rail office, undertake a review of the number of closures that have taken place over the last 2 years on Line 1 East Extension to be conducted immediately, and the results reported back via memo to council, and be it further resolved that the rail office provide the number of claims submitted by the public as a result of Line 1 East Extension construction over the last 2 years. And Madam Chair, if that's okay, I'll just add a couple of extra quick points. I think I've highlighted that the lack of coordination is a major issue. I've heard of many situations of tire damage, as we've all heard, from unfinished roads, which is something we want to see. And at this point, I'm moving this item forward. I'm sure that my East End Council colleagues will also like to probably add some notes to this as well. If not, I'm hoping to have council support here today because it is a very struggling concern in our end of the East End of the city. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lula.
I think that, I've highlighted some of the frustrations that we felt at least this week, but this has been an ongoing issue in the East End throughout the course of the last 4 years. It seems that we go through a bit of a cycle with Stage 2 LRT, where we get together and we deal with some of the situations and the communication issues, and things seem to go quite well for a little bit. And it seems like we have to have this conversation almost every quarter, where the moment that we let up and we assume, okay, looks like everything's working now, we end up in a situation where communication falls apart, project schedules and timelines aren't respected. We're told with less than 48 hours notice of new closures that are being added last minute. We couldn't get the labor force that we needed this weekend, so we're not going to do this after we've dealt with hours of extra casework, explaining the communication that we're receiving from Stage 2. It's been an ongoing frustration. I'd like to thank the chair for bringing this forward. I think that it'll go a long way to remedying some of the major issues that we've been dealing with. And make no mistake, colleagues, we've tried without bringing motions to council, without bringing motions to committee to handle some of these issues. And there just seems to be a lack of accountability when it comes to these issues. So I appreciate you bringing this forward today, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lulaf. Councillor Dudas.
I also want to echo Councillor Lulaf's comments and thank the chair for bringing this forward. We all know that construction is necessary to see the LRT built. It is an absolute requirement, and we can't get past the construction and receive something new without it. However, surprises are not welcome for anyone. It's not welcome for our community. It's not welcome for we as councillors. Last minute decisions that have impacts, not just on traffic, but just on the quality of life of residents in our communities. It's not just about sitting in traffic or being surprised by a lane closure. It's about the fact that getting your child to a soccer game on time, getting to a doctor's appointment, trying to understand how you're going to pick up your child from daycare after a long day of work. We are seeing so much more traffic now that the federal government has decided to force its employees back to work, which means that any small change that felt like a small change by construction on LRT projects in the East End is now immense and impactful. So I'm very pleased to see that my colleague has brought this forward. I fully support it. I will be asking him for a friendly amendment, which I will read out right now, because I think that once again, we are almost at the tail end of this construction in the East End. I say that, you know, cautiously, optimistically, knowing that next year we're promised the LRT. But I do hope that we continue to learn from all of these experiences, improve as a city, and make sure that we don't repeat the same problems that we've had. So my request is a friendly amendment that says, whereas the impacts of the stage 2 construction on the entire East End has been tremendous, it has been imperative that the city proactively undertake a post-mortem assessment of the past 2 years' work, allowing both the city and OC Transpo to identify deficiencies, successes, and failures, and how they have communicated and handled closures. And that is a whereas, not a therefore be resolved.
Thanks, Councillor Dudas. I'm not seeing any other hands up, so I'll just add, I think my colleagues have noted, it certainly feels like once a year, at least, we have a situation where we reach a boiling point and requirements are no longer being adhered to, the communication gets sloppy, and, you know, forget respect for the ward councillors. This is really about respect for the public and for our residents and the impact to their quality of life. So certainly hope this will be a learning moment. Councillor Johnson.
Great. So I just wanted to, I am very interested in Councillor Dudas's amendment, just because I think anytime we're asking for postmortem or public learning, I think those are, you know, what the public expects from a city is not to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. So I just wonder, is that something we could put on the screen? Just because I'm not really sure what questions I can ask based on that without having it, without reading it. Do you know what I mean?
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. We're just going to pull that up, and I've reviewed it. It seems well in line with the issues and learning, but certainly I'm not chairing this meeting, but I've, for Rose is quickly adding in the lines here. Oh,
Councillor
it's on the
Dudas
screen.
did circulate it, I believe.
Yeah.
Not to committee members, just to Rose at the moment.
My apologies. It was just sent to the committee coordinator, so she's going to get it up for you.
And I did see the full motion circulated, so I'm comfy with that. I just want to make sure that I see the amendment, please. Okay, beauty. Am I able to ask a question about the amendment? Is it still my 5 minutes, Chair? Yeah. Okay, so I think my question, I mean, I completely support what's on the table, but yeah, I just wanted to use this opportunity to ask further, you know, how, because I think we've asked it at other committees about the stage 2 construction project and how the postmortem is disseminated. And I just wonder if there's someone on the call, even though it's the transportation committee, to sort of respond to the broader question about stage 2 construction postmortem and how that knowledge gets transferred from side to side to side.
Mr. Chair, this is the city clerk. My suggestion, Madam Acting Chair, excuse me, my suggestion would be that if this motion is passed, it would rise alongside the rest of this report to council, and the staff that are available would be available to speak to the broader issues when it rises to council.
All right, that's perfect. Thanks for the clarification. That's all, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Johnson. I'm not seeing any hands, so is the motion carried
Carried.
with the amendment? Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair Kitts, now Vice Chair Kitts. And thank you for that. So on that, I guess I got to receive the presentation. So thank you for that. Is that item received? Thank you. Moving on to item number 6, I believe that Councillor Troster had a couple of quick questions. Oh, we do have one delegation, forgive me.
Back to me, my apologies. I should have said, is the amendment carried from the last motion? And is the motion as amended carried? Thank you.
Okay, now I'm officially back. Thank you. Thanks, Court. Thanks, everybody. Now we are moving to the next item, and Councillor Troster is keeping me in line. Thank you, Councillor Troster. We do have no correspondence, no presentation. We do have correspondence from David Pritchard, but he's actually joining us online right now. I believe, David, you've been here before. So we'll go with the presentation and questions to staff. So 5 minutes, the floor is yours, Mr. Pritchard. Oh, I believe you're on mute there.
This is the Welsh alphabet. I won't speak to you in Welsh, but given the intractability I've had from the City of Ottawa over the past decade, I might as well. I notice nobody from staff or council seem to have a disability. I don't know how many of the planning staff have disability. And this, I think, makes a big difference. Let's start with the first. There's a number of things I would go through. The first is this nonsense about free parking for 4 hours, whatever it is. Try and go downtown and find a parking spot in which you can park your van and unload your wheelchair. Try and go downtown with your disabled child that has cerebral palsy and try and get out. Try and go downtown with your van that's equipped with a ramp or a hydraulic. You can't do it because there isn't the space. When we lived in Yellowknife, which was my previous place, every city office, every government office, and even the local drugstores all had a disabled parking spot, an accessible parking spot. The downtown is virtually on certain times impossible for me to get to. How many of you shop at Costco? Have you ever seen empty disabled spots at Costco? Going to Canadian Tire on a weekend? Going to Home Depot on a weekend? All those spots are full. So why are you preventing me from going downtown? You know, it's up to you people. I was, as it notes in the notes, I was down in Cooper Street the other day. For me to get anywhere, I had to walk my walker all along the street. I couldn't get up. It was a 10-inch thing. When I got to the end, I found they had a bike rack parked there. So what is so difficult about moving the bike rack over 20 feet and putting in 2 disabled spots in the corner? That way you're right by, it's all wrapped up on the street corner. The other one that, as I noted in my thing, is the proposed Glebe Road. It's got somebody wants to go down to shop on Bank Street. Chances are they're not going to be able to, because again, you go into what you probably don't appreciate is you go into a lot of these places and it says, oh yeah, you can park there. It says, oh, you can park in no parking zone. But most no parking zones, as I noted, are within 5 meters of the corner, which means you get a ticket. I have had more parking tickets in the past decade in Yellowknife than I've had in the previous 40 years of driving. I think that says more about Yellowknife than me, or check that, more about Ottawa than me. You can tell my frustration. You go through Blind River. Downtown Blind River has more disabled spots. Go down to Brockville. It has several disabled spots. Go down to Port Hope. All these little places that rely on tourism have disabled parking. You go down to Port Hope, and they don't have any, with the exception of the funeral home, but we won't talk about that. On every street corner in the downtown is at least 1, if not 2, disabled spots. So if somebody is disabled, they can just go park on the accessible parking lot, walk around the corner, and do their shopping on the main street. You can't do that here. Well, you can tell my frustration. Now, I don't want to get onto the bike lanes too much. Well, I do actually. I'm a bit prejudiced. I've been struck 3 times by bicycles on the sidewalk. So I'm not a big fan of bicycles on the sidewalk, but there doesn't seem to be any enforcement in Ottawa on that. You take the Glebe Road one. I talked to one of the planners. He said, well, just go up somebody's driveway. And that's great. But what if there's no driveway nearby? You go into a lot of these places. We don't go. We used to meet guests downtown on what's its name? Runs north and south, and you just recently restricted all the parking on it. We used to go down there for dinner with friends. We don't go down there anymore. Because
thank you, David. If you want to take 10 seconds to wrap up.
Yeah, this is one of the few cities I know in North America that does not have disabled street parking, and that's a shame, and that's on you.
Thank you very much for coming out today. Seeing no questions to the delegation. Thank you for your delegation today. Moving on to questions, Councillor Troster.
Thank you. I promise I'll make it very quick. I was just looking at some of the language in the report, and I'm just wondering if someone could give me a concrete example of what or would not constitute an obligated organization when it comes to providing parking for folks with disabilities.
Sorry, I thought it was on. Sorry, through the chair. Obligated organization is defined within the AODA and the integrated standards within there. The prime reason for our amendment and bringing in the definitions is because obligated organizations have changed within their definitions and became effective in 2018 after the traffic and parking bylaw was originally approved.
Okay, thank you. But could you let me know, could you just give me an example of an organization, a kind of organization that we would be obliged to do this and one that wouldn't?
At this point, it is virtually all organizations, even a small private organization, if it has an employee, is required to meet the.
So any
criteria.
organization with an employee.
Correct.
So it's pretty much all organizations. Okay. This is a one-year pilot, but we're making permanent changes to the bylaw. So I'm just wondering if you could clarify that piece.
As far as the obligated organizations and the changes in Part C of the bylaw, that is a permanent change.
Okay. Were there additional accessibility concerns related to parking that were considered as part of this review? I'm just asking because my office hears a lot about the need for loading zones near downtown apartment buildings. We've had requests for accessible bus stops. We were able to accommodate one of them. I'm just wondering if there's other things you learned through this process that you think we should be acting on.
A large part of that, as far as on-street is concerned, is what the pilot project will be addressing. We still haven't established criteria and figuring out where the spaces are going to be, that kind of thing, and the feasibility of them in the long-term future. That's all part of the pilot project.
Okay, I'll say like one of the biggest challenges in my ward when it comes to adding new cycling infrastructure is we sometimes hear from folks with disabilities with the disabled parking pass who can no longer park there because they have greater permissions to park. So it's just a bit of a challenge when it comes to downtown where we're sharing space. So I'm very interested to see how this shapes up. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trosser. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just wanted to thank staff in both the Accessibility Office and the Transportation staff who worked with me on the original inquiry that I had put forward that's listed on this agenda to enhance on-street dedicated accessible spots that this amendment in this report will help to facilitate. So I just want to thank them for acting quickly. I only put that inquiry forward earlier this year. So to see that we're going to be moving forward with a one-year pilot as quickly as we are is very encouraging, and it's been something that we've heard from the community for a long time that's needed. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for supporting me in my efforts to see this come to fruition.
Great words. Thank you, Councillor Bradley. So just before we move off this, we do have a quick belts and suspenders amending motion by Vice Chair Kitts.
Thank you, Chair. Whereas on October 24th, 2024, Transportation Committee will consider a report titled Minor Amendments to the Traffic and Parking Bylaw to Enhance Accessible Parking Opportunities. And whereas under her delegated authority, the Director of Infrastructure Services will work to issue a technical bulletin to correct an error in the chart found in section 3.1.2 of the city's accessibility design standards to ensure it properly aligns with section 80.36 of the Provincial Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation. And whereas the error also appeared in document 2, part C of the report, and whereas the recommendation of this report is to ensure consistency with the Integrated Accessibility Standards Regulation and communicating these standards clearly to the public, therefore be it resolved that the chart found in document 2, part C of the report be replaced with the revised chart as follows. And I will not read it, but you can see it there on the screen.
Great. I won't expect you to read all that. So is that carried? Okay, no, we're not going, no one leave yet. We still have exciting stuff. Sorry, this is the longest meeting I've had yet. I'm just going to drag it on. We do have a notice of motion from Councillor Luloff, and before people get excited and leave, I do have a small thing on other business about name the plow. So Councillor, yes, it's exciting stuff. Councillor Luloff, did you wish to read your notice of motion?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just, okay, great. It's on the screen. Whereas Prestwick Drive between Des Epinette Avenue and Innes Road serves as a critical collector route in Orléans. And whereas the segment of Prestwick Drive is a vital active transportation corridor for children and adults, given its proximity to local schools, a community park, and a local shopping center. And whereas the Community Heights Community Association has identified significant safety concerns for vulnerable road users. And whereas community safety zones are a tool to help reduce the speed traveled along a roadway and to improve the safety of vulnerable road users in the area. And whereas the community has repeatedly expressed concerns regarding the persistent and dangerous speeding issues on this stretch. Whereas CSCs in Ottawa are established via delegated authority of the General Manager of Public Works and the Director of Traffic Services within locations that meet the council approved criteria for the installation of ASE, and whereas the segment of Prestwick Drive between Disneyland Avenue and Innes Road does not meet the council approved criteria for ASE. Whereas based on a speed survey conducted in 2023, Prestwick Drive between Summerlands Crescent and Summerlands Crescent has an operating speed of 45 and an average speed of 40 kilometers an hour. Therefore, be it resolved that Transportation Committee recommend that council approve designating a community safety zone on Prestwick Drive between Des Epinette Avenue and Innes Road, and installing the corresponding signage as soon as practicable. I will say that I've spent quite a bit of time along this stretch. The operating speeds that are being described in the motion is not what I experienced, even using one of those speed gun devices. Regularly see much higher traffic. I've spent a significant amount of traffic calming budget on this stretch, and in consultation with the local police, the doubling of fines within community safety zones are a significant deterrent to the continuation of this dangerous behavior, and looking forward to your support at the next Transportation Committee meeting. Thank you very much.
Great. So that's a notice of motion. We'll deal with that next committee. I do have to go back and say the words out loud for item 6.1, which is minor amendments to traffic and parking bylaw, enhanced accessibility parking opportunities, carried as amended. Is that carried as amended?
Carried as amended.
Okay, it's on the record. We're good. So now we're going to other business, the exciting stuff. So first of all, I want to thank our amazing team that has come forward. The goal of the campaign for Name the Plow is interesting and new and different. And the goal was to raise awareness around snowplow safety with winter coming up with children and youth in Ottawa. And the City of Ottawa snowplow operators work very hard every winter. They do a terrific job. I've heard for the last few years how wonderful they're doing. I think we all agree. Our plows are essential at keeping Ottawa moving. And between September 9th to the 30th, we had almost 500 names that were submitted by Ottawa's children and youth. Once the names are submitted, when the period closed, the names are put into a raffle. And if you saw the really cool videos of our operators that were out there spinning the bins and pulling names out, these are the names. Do we have a drum roll noise? No, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. I still got to finish reading this. So originally we picked 48 names, and the voting took place between the 14th and the 21st with over 2,200 votes. I'm very pleased to announce the votes are in. We have 24 names representing 24 wards. Don't forget to keep an eye out for the newly named plows across the city. When you see it, take a picture, tag us in it. Hashtag #OttCityPlow, name the plow. OttCity, name the plow. I'll tweet that out. The final 24 names are Sir Plows a Lot, Fast and Furious, Furious George, not for you, George Taruse. You Don't Snow Me, Plowy McPlow, no face, Snowmore, Good Snowman, Harry, Winter Wonderplow, Tim Snortons, Pac-Man Constantnej, Conquer Neige, Austin Powers, Shiver Me Blizzard, Hans Snowlow, Blizzard Wizard, Plowosaurus Rex, Snowmageddon, Snow Big Deal, John Bon Snowy, Snowy Gone Kenobi, Sherlock, Snow Memes, Taylor Drift, that's a winner. And You're a Blizzard. So again, those are the names that we've come up with that have been part of it. Of course, we're going to really tie this into an education campaign, more details to come. We look forward to celebrating our 24 namely new plows, and who gets the fight over gets what. I want Taylor Swift. I want Taylor Swift, Taylor Drift. But nonetheless, that's the message I have to deliver today. So please stay tuned. Also, a quick reminder, let's be snow angels out there. We've been really lucky last year, but it's always good to help a neighbor, help shovel out a fire hydrant, and let's have a great winter ahead today as we head into it. So that's my other news business today. I'll circulate the names immediately after this meeting, and I'm just looking over before I get in more trouble. We have no inquiries and no other business. So we'll be adjourning till November 28th, 2024. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Good job, Chair.